Liana, you're muted.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, it took a while, huh? Hi, guys. Hi, everyone. I'm Liana, co-founder at Embry Tech. Welcome to Online Hero Talks. As part of the Hero House Global Startup Program Series, today we're hosting HAX, an early-stage venture capital-based program. The online event is organized and hosted by Hero House, and the corporate partner and support of this initiative is Viva MTS. So for this evening, and some of you morning, depending where you are in the world, I will be your moderator, and I would like to introduce you our panelists for today. So we're lucky to have Garrett, who is a partner and program director at HAX, and Ali, who's a serial entrepreneur and currently is co-founder and CEO at Robomart, a company that successfully graduated HAX and actually very relevant in today's world. So before we start, I would like to actually grab audience attention and tell you that right below in the comment section, please leave your comments, questions you have, and I'll try to come back to it towards the end of our panel. So let's rock and roll. And the first question goes to Garrett. Can you please tell us a brief overview of HAX program?
Perfect. Yeah, and I think I have like a very short presentation just to kind of give some context about what HAX is and what we do. You guys tell me when, I don't know if you can see it or not. It's on my screen. Let me know when that's live, and then I can do a very short version of what we do at HAX.
It's on. You can
Perfect. Start. Yeah, so I just lead off with maybe 5 minutes about what we do at HAX, then love to dig in a little bit deeper of how we engage and how we kind of work with hard tech companies, especially at these very early stages, whether it's like folks like Robomart, but also teams from all over the world working on very different problems. So at HAX, our focus is really hands-on venture capital and really focusing on hard problems, hard tech, things that traditionally investors shy away from. We love to dive a little bit deeper, and that looks like consumer products, medical devices, robotics, really anything that lives in the physical world. So since 2012, we started, we've invested in about close to 250 now, 250 companies from all corners of the world. And really the thing that's central to all these is really the combination of physical technologies, whether it's sensing, automation, life sciences, mixing with digital technologies. So connectivity, machine learning, digitalization, kind of all the things that software has done well on kind of screens and servers is now kind of working its way into the physical world. And we do that in a wide range of industries. A simple way to break it down is about a big focus for us is B2B. It's about 70% is in more industrial and enterprise investments, but we also make investments in medical devices and consumer electronics. And then we also invest all over the world. So folks from all corners of the world, a bias towards North America, but also kind of growing presence in the rest of the world, and more investments kind of happening in not always expected places. So the actual program, so we make our first investment, and it's a $250,000 investment package, which includes kind of 6 months of deep dive engagement with our team in Shenzhen, San Francisco, and Tokyo, as well as kind of interaction with all these global founders that are part of the HAX community. And then once that we make that first investment, kind of write a $250,000 check, but we also invest onward into companies as well as they grow and scale. So as a global venture capital firm, we're investing usually up to about $3 million into companies as they grow and scale, and then continue to work with them as they grow. So we actually bring teams to Shenzhen and San Francisco, get them access to these really premier ecosystems. And then if you guys haven't been to Shenzhen, this is a video of our office there. I'm guessing it's very broken up and blurry, but our goal is to give teams kind of a landing spot in China, access to tons of facilities, expertise, and resources. Right now with COVID, it's a little bit difficult to get people in and around borders, but that's changing very quickly. And then you also get access to Shenzhen, where if you haven't been to Shenzhen, it's this magical place where if you ever build hardware or build anything in the physical world, really anything is within arm's reach or 1 hour's drive, whether it's the world's premier factories or suppliers building things in the physical world. I like to say, like, engineering, in engineering school, like on my first day, I always tell my professors, like, tell people this place exists on the very first day of your mechanical or electrical engineering degree. And we have a team that is able to support. So decades of experience kind of working with these things, bringing these things to market. And this is just one quick example of what teams usually apply to us with. So this is a autonomous logistics robot. So you can tell it's a prototype, right? It's not a final product, but you can see all the technology starting to come together. And they actually were talking to customers, building things out. And then in 3 months, they're able to take that and move it to this. Again, this is probably broken up, but this is a autonomous commercial vehicle inspection robot. And actually within 3 months, they're actually going and launching pilots for their customers. And then they've gone on to grow and scale and become actually a pretty significant company, featured in the New York Times a couple months ago around a robot they built for COVID cleaning, or kind of disinfecting hospitals with robotics. So really kind of that's the arc we love to see teams on. Like, start with a prototype, let's deep dive, work with them for a few months, and then help them support and scale and grow into those next generations. So one last thing is that we're part of a global venture capital firm, investing out of our $277 million fund. And our goal is to kind of bring together many different ecosystems from many different difficult sets of technology all together and really invest in areas that other investors traditionally shy away from, but helping grow and scale on those earliest points. So that's I guess I went a little bit over time, but that's a very short version of HAX, and love to maybe dig in with conversation and Ollie's experience, and Liana with your experience with hardware as well. And we can talk about kind of how we help teams and things going forward.
Awesome, great, thank you so much. That was a very good intro and kind of put a picture on all aspects that we want to talk today. So what are some of the program acceptance criteria? Can you, Garrett, talk about that? And is there like any specific expectations that you may have towards teams, industries, geographies? You said like but is there like, why are you certainly like, leaning towards this geography versus this? Like any like those details. And lastly, like, is there any specific requirements and expectations from international teams? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I would say key requirements for us that we often look for are early stage. So we're often the very first institutional investor into companies. So teams might have angel checks or kind of maybe some early stage, but we're often the very first investor. So we're usually looking at pre-seed and seed investments. The other bit that we often look at from a criteria for what the team has, we often look for prototypes. So we don't invest in things that are just napkin sketches or big ideas that haven't been put in the real world yet. We love teams. And it's not that we like care how advanced the prototype is. It's more that we want to invest in founders that bias towards making things. They build things. They want to get it on the real world. We often don't invest in sole founders. So we also look for people that are able to build teams around them and wanting to like have more than just one person that's dedicated to the project. And then I think the other thing that we often do is break down where and how the team is invested, or like look the problem they're working on. So like I showed in the presentation, about 70% of our investments are into B2B. I would say that's, we will invest in consumer, but our criteria is very, like, we have very high standards. We've made a lot of consumer investments and our standards have become very high. And I think what we've seen in B2B investments versus maybe consumer is there's a much often clearer path to market, or much less risk potentially going into B2B markets, especially with hardware. So, for example, for the robotic company I showed for commercial vehicles, they're able to go and generate a pretty significant amount of revenue with maybe 2 or 3 robots. And they don't have to think about the same issues of production and scale and getting a factory, like kind of building 1 million of something to get to the same revenue that they could potentially get with 3 things. And that actually creates a much clearer path to market, especially with a small amount of money and you're a small team. That being said, we still do make those other investments where you need to scale and do those things. But I would say we're more focused on B2B, where there's a very different path to market. And then your last question was globally. We will invest in teams from anywhere. And right now it's about half our investments are in teams that are in North America, so Canada and the US. About 25% are in China. And we have a different investment vehicle for teams in China. And then the rest is broken down between Europe. The last 25% is Europe, India, Australia, Israel, and then also founders that have roots in Africa and different places that you wouldn't expect. So I would say international teams, we don't have any specific criteria other than having a clear path or understanding of the market that you're going to be in. So I think one thing that we see with international teams a lot is we're building something for where we're sitting, but we want to bring it to America, or we want to bring it to Europe. I think if that's part of your pitch, we want to see that you have some connection into those markets, or some way to demonstrate that you can bring your idea from Israel to the United States, or from Armenia to mainland Europe, and kind of making sure that there's a clear path for that to happen. And we can help with that, but we just often see, if you want to cross borders, we want to see the hints of how that might happen.
Get it. And you said that for B2C, you have higher standards. Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
What exactly are those higher standards? Like, in what parts
of
the process?
So I would say probably the 2 criteria that we look for in B2C teams is what we find is that traditional distribution models. So let's say I sell to a retailer and then they sell to an end customer, are just broken. Like they work, but they work for maybe if you're a very large company. And I think what we get really excited about for our B2C teams is 2 things. One is if you use technology to enable like a fundamentally new experience. So whether it's kind of like an end-to-end customer experience. I know you guys are doing this at Embry, right? Like you're creating kind of a new experience through your product by connecting it through digital content and different ways of engaging. Really kind of there has to be something that says this customer wants to interact with you every day and work with you, and that give you access to something that they wouldn't otherwise, and interact with you in a new way. That's one criteria. Or fundamentally breaking distribution models. So if you have a new way of actually addressing a market through an entirely different way, and this is what Ali and Robomart are doing fantastically, right? Like they're offering an amazing new service that just flips the entire distribution model on its head. And it's using technology to rethink distribution models for otherwise consumer-oriented services. So I would say those things, and like I think when I say very high standards, it's making sure like this team can do it, right? So for Ali and team, they have experience launching complex systems problems in the past, right? They already have a proof of what they're building, and then they already have built out partnerships to go and actually deliver on the things that they're saying. So I think there's a little bit more requirement of okay, demonstrate that you can do what you promise you can do from a B2C standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of marketing, a lot of marketing that needs to go into it, and it's good when you have already set way of doing that, or distribution channels that are either new or you have connections with. Sounds good. So how about this question is, both of you, I would love to hear from both of you, is basically about how does the process in the HAX program looks like for a typical participant. Like, how does the program is designed? What are the stages in the program? And also, like, how does the HAX team actually help startups at each stage of the program to make the transition from prototype to production? And is there any like business marketing help in addition to just the prototyping and the hardware part? Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to maybe jump in?
Yeah,
Garrett?
go ahead. I'll love to hear your experience, and then I can I can give the broader view as well.
Sure. Yeah. So for us in particular, HAX has been incredibly valuable, right? When we were joining, we did our own diligence and found out from other HAX teams in the past, and overwhelmingly we heard amazing things about the program. So our experience is a little bit different to how it's traditionally been. We did not get a chance to get to Shenzhen, as you can imagine, at the height of the pandemic. We had gotten everything arranged. We had bought our tickets to China, but at the same time, things changed so rapidly. But I think one really amazing thing that HAX was able to do is in a very short period of time, convert their program into a fully remote program. And I think it was the first time that they'd ever done that. So, kudos to them and the team for doing that. The thing that you get, whether it's virtual or in person, is some of the smartest people in their industry, right? These are the HAX team. You can find people with multidisciplinary backgrounds, with expertise in areas that you wouldn't have thought. And so, the kind of day to day, you can ping somebody who has expertise in an area where you don't, and really, really pick their brain. There are engineering resources that get assigned to teams, and so you can actually work with engineers, and they can work directly on the stuff that you're working on. HAX provides a lot more than just engineering as well. So one of the things that was really valuable for us in particular is a lot of the fundraising support and going through the process. So towards the end of the program, we were raising our seed round and being able to work with HAX on defining our materials, our narrative, and outreach to investors has been really, really valuable. And then finally around marketing. So we're very close to launch now in Santa Monica, our first market. And we're working closely with people at HAX to define our marketing strategy, our PR strategy. And so that's also part of the program. And it's just that it's now just become entirely remote because of the pandemic. But I'm sure maybe Garrett can talk about how things are going back to more of a hybrid approach where you get that in-person experience as well.
Thanks, Abby.
Cool. Yeah, and I mean, I appreciate. Thank you for the kind words. And I think especially with your guys' experience, there's also something about like just being in person that I feel like that you guys missed out on. And as we've said, like you guys are always welcome to come back. And when things open up, we love to sit down and work together in person too when that time comes. And
Absolutely.
I think that's I think you're hitting on a lot of how we try to structure the program. So we purposely structure it pretty in a more agile way, or kind of like a nimble way. So not every team is getting the same resources, the same engagement, because teams are just very different. So we'll have Ali and team that are working on advanced mobility projects and different ways of sensing what's happening inside their vehicle and working with different customers and different mechanisms. And that's fundamentally different than, I don't know, a medical robot or an IoT sensor for an industrial chemical plant. And if we were to come in and say, okay, on week 1, we do your marketing, and week 2, we do product development, like it just wouldn't work. So really kind of how we structure the program is, hey, we're going to be deep diving with you guys for 6 months. We're going to be putting engineers on your team, putting designers in and out. Kind of our goal is to really get teams from where they are to where they want to go in that specific amount of time. And if anything, kind of help teams get to that next set of milestones, but also start giving them tools and access to communities and resources that ultimately let them continue those behaviors after we make that first 6 months of engagement. And like Ali said, we're investors, right? We want to be partners in your company for the long run, right? Like we're not just, oh yeah, we did our work, see you later. Like our goal is to be with you for a long time and continue investing and working with you and giving those resources. So that's what I find most valuable about HAX as well, or what I enjoy about as well, is just access to this global community of founders that have been successful, founders that have learned really hard lessons, founders that have built things in the real world, and that's what I think teams often benefit from most, is kind of access to all of those intelligent, experienced, and thoughtful people.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, we've talked about the COVID and how it impacted your batches in the program. So, like, what do you think? Is it possible to do hardware when you're not in person? Because I think as hardware, like, it's okay with software, but with hardware, you really, it's kind of mandatory to be in the place, in the lab, and so forth. Like, how's that basically taken care of? Or like, do you feel like the efficiency of the program is affected, or like, what are your thoughts about that for like the next batches, so that they feel comfortable about it?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, the short answer is there are things that just are better done in person together, right? And I think that always be the case. That being said, I would say there's a lot of things that have become better because of COVID as well. So like the fact that there's a lot of teams that are able to stay closer to their customers, and especially in this uncertain time, if you're not like moving to Shenzhen to kind of do your R&D, you're actually staying closer home to your customers, and you're learning from them in their very uncertain moments as well. I think we've adapted a bit of how we do prototyping and how we kind of are able to collaborate with teams, even if they're not sitting next to us. So even just a simple, you should see our DHL FedEx bill is much higher than it ever has been, because we're shipping prototypes all over the world now. So teams are able to get on the phone, share CAD back and forth, share PCBs, and then get them in a box and have them shipped from Shenzhen or wherever to all parts of the world. So I would say there has been some efficiency losses, right? There is something really nice about being in Shenzhen and being able to get a CNC part done overnight or a PCB done overnight, which traditionally, if you try to do that anywhere else in the world, it's 10 times the cost and takes an extra 2 weeks. But we've been able to find a way that instead of getting it overnight, you maybe get it in 4 or 5 days, right? Or 3 days, and able to keep these iteration cycles really fast. But ultimately, we do see a lot of value in teams still coming in and working with us in San Francisco and Shenzhen and Tokyo, and doing these things hands-on, just because the nature of, I think, working together still has a lot of value. But that being said, I think we're going to be in this mode for at least a few more months, if not at least for the foreseeable future. And we have been building a lot of things within our program to work in this hybrid mode of, okay, sometimes we can work together, sometimes we can't. Sometimes there's a piece of news that says, sorry, you can't get on that plane, like Ollie mentioned, they had their plane tickets, right? And really kind of more building our program based on the principles of agility and kind of making things work and figuring out the best way to do things, rather than saying, all right, here's step by step. Oh, this step's broken. What are we going to do? We kind of build it more to solve the problem as we need to go, rather than solve it entirely up front.
Yeah, and Ali, what about like your experience doing it? Because I'm sure when you applied, you were planning on doing it in person, with engineers, like hands-on. How was your experience actually doing it remotely? And was it still, I'm sure you said it was helpful, but like, how did the process actually go? Like, just the day-to-day operations.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, like Garrett said, some things are better done in person, and hardware is one of them. And so you do have a lot of advantages being on the ground. But having said that, in our particular case, it was a little bit different. So even before going, we expected to manage development in 2 markets, in California and in Shenzhen. And so the idea, because we're building mobile grocery stores, that are automated, the vehicles themselves were not something we could ship over. And so having base vehicles in California and working on the systems, the sensors, the shelving unit, the entire tech stack and software that goes into the vehicle was something that we could have done in Shenzhen, and we did do in Shenzhen. So so it was a little bit of a learning curve for us to understand how much needs to be done in Shenzhen versus California, and figure out that split. But I think that's where the value of HAX really came in, is helping us really nail down, what are the problems, what are the challenges, how do you address them? You're resource constrained always as a startup, so how do you manage with limited resources in very quick time? And so I think there may be some losses, as Garrett said, but at the same time, for teams that have a similar setup as ours, I don't think, especially in our case, that there was any significant loss. Right? What usually could take maybe 1 day, maybe took 2 or 3 days. It wasn't a massive difference. And so the day-to-day for us was to work with the HAX team. We used to have weekly check-ins where we would update them on progress on our end. Our CTO and engineering team would work with engineers from HAX, and it was a constant, almost daily work schedule on the things that we needed to get done. And yeah, we had to use new ways, using our chat more than we would have expected to, obviously, if you're not there in person. But overall, it was incredibly valuable, and I still believe that it's something that, even as a fully remote program, I hope it doesn't continue as a fully remote program, and I don't think it will. But even if it does, I still see significant value for startups joining HAX and going through that program.
Yeah, definitely, especially, being closer to the Chinese market and all the pluses being in Shenzhen. So if we're talking about the program when, let's say, we are not remote any longer, do all participants pass the program both in Shenzhen and San Francisco? Is this just part of the program, or it depends on the startup's, traction or motives, primary needs? How does that work? If you could, Garrett, kind of clear that. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I would say traditionally, and even I think this is semi-happening virtually as well, but I think the way that we structure the program is 3 markets. So first is your home market, or where you're launching. Mm-hmm. Second is Shenzhen, and third is San Francisco. And then we look at the next 6 months and say, when is it best to be in each of those places based on what you need to achieve? So some teams have a prototype ready, their customers love it, and they just need to figure out how to make more of them. It's like, okay, we need to get you to Shenzhen, and we're going to focus on commercialization. And that's like, everything's set, let's go. Sometimes teams come and like, hey, we have this awesome technology. It's on a bench top right now. It's not quite like there yet. We have this inkling of who the customers are. So we'll spend maybe the first month in their home market or in San Francisco, where we kind of help find that pre-product market fit and get more confidence before like, okay, get on a plane to Shenzhen, let's do some R&D. Or we say, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and we need to get you fundraising. So like maybe after the first month, we get you to San Francisco right away, get it built, get your next round of fundraising, and then we bring you to Shenzhen after that to do commercialization and scale. So I think the better way to look at it for us is like, okay, we have these 3 puzzle pieces of these markets. And we also have our Tokyo office too, which is one of the best B2B ecosystems that exists in the world. Mm-hmm. So our goal is saying, okay, what do you need to achieve in the next 6 months to help you grow and scale, get to what you need to get revenue, get investment, and get your product development together? And then how do we build a schedule that makes the most of those resources and timing? Okay. So short answer is yes. All those things are part of the equation, and we expect teams to spend time in each of those ecosystems. But it's not prescriptive in terms of when and how much and at what scale.
Yeah, so it basically depends on the progress of the team and like, what are their needs. Okay,
exactly.
So Ali, I would like to we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but just kind of concretely, like for potential startups that are listening to you right now, and like, what are some of the best experiences, program highlights, and main learnings that you kind of have your teammates had throughout the program, and like kind of your recommendations, or what would you like kind of, you know, what would you tell the next basically startup that is thinking, like what are some of the brightest highlights that you can, you know, kind of motivate them or to kind of look into HAX?
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, with startups at the really early stages, it's always a question of whether you're going to get value out of an accelerator. And there are some accelerators where, unfortunately, you don't get value out of, right? And in my 10 years of doing startups, I've been a part of a number of different accelerators, and I also mentor on different accelerators. So I've been able to see the level of value that different accelerators offer. The one key difference with HAX and SOSV is that they are consistently regarded as one of the top, I'd say in the top 2 or top 3 in the world. So one, reputation. So any startup joining the program knows that they're aligning themselves with an investor with a very solid reputation. I believe they're the second most active seed investor in the world. That's as of recent. So so that validation and reputation really helps in the long run, right? Second is the engineering side of things, the hardware development support, and being able to get a very structured program. A lot of things as a startup, like I said, you're resource constrained. You don't have a huge team. There are things that you miss, things that even as organized as you think you are, you know, there's oversight, there are things that you can miss. And the HAX team is there to really force you to look at what are your challenges, how are you operating right now, and how you can do things in the most efficient and fast way. And a lot of accelerators do that, right? So they have a structured program where they help you accelerate. That's by definition what they're supposed to do. But I think HAX has done a really great job in covering these two aspects. And then the third is the alumni network, right? So it's again something that we haven't really experienced as such, but over the coming years, I expect that the network of other founders in HAX and the greater SOSV network are going to be extremely valuable. One quick example: right now we're getting closer to launch, and so I spoke to the PR lead at HAX, and I asked for some support, you know, from other founders that have gone through the program about our launch strategy. And immediately I was connected to 2 startup founders that recently launched in the last, you know, year. So this is something where a startup maybe that is really early stage and doesn't have a network can't really get access to. And so these are the 3 things I think, as I laid out, that are really were valuable for us and can be valuable for early stage startups as well.
So you already graduated, right? Am I understanding this correctly? You've finished the program, right?
So it's an ongoing thing, and the way that HAX usually works, I think Garrett can probably explain it better, but it's, you know, you have rolling batches. You are assigned to a batch, and they put in as much as you need, right? So I'm still speaking to people at HAX right now about our PR and marketing strategy, and so it's an ongoing process. But the day-to-day, yes, it was a very structured 6-month program, and you know, we had weekly check-ins, and we're sort of past that point right now, but we're still highly engaged, and I've never felt like I ping someone and I don't have support available. So like Garrett said, you know, there are investors, and they're going to be our investors for the next decade, and so you know, they're always there to help out.
Okay, yeah, clear. So it's like a strict 6-month program, and then after that you have like ongoing kind of support, which is amazing, I think. And it seems like after the 6-month program, is it true that most of the support is more in the business, or again, whatever the startup needs at that point?
So I think like the short answer is probably yes. So I would say the way that we look at that first 6 months is us really getting to know each other, right? Like us, like, okay, how do we help you in the best way? And it's often in product development, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, manufacturing, kind of the gritty things that not everybody has access to. So I think our goal is to support on those first and foremost, to get through those early technology development cycles. But I would say onward after 6 months, it's more of a guidance and mentorship role and community role, which it often takes place as business advice. Like, okay, who do I need to hire next, or what partners should I be looking at to think about distribution and scale? And then there's also technology questions like, okay, we're deciding on these new 2 chipsets. Have you guys used these before? So I would say it's a lot more of having just access to the right group of people to have these ongoing discussions. And we do, so I'm under indexing on the business support. That's kind of where I focus on business strategy and helping teams scale that way. We do that throughout that first 6 months as well. So really the goal is getting teams in the best position for their go-to-market, and making sure that we're not just building stuff, we're building the right stuff. And especially Ali mentioned, like every startup is resource constrained. So you have to make very specific choices of saying, am I building the right thing for this market? Am I investing the right thing to have a first Gen 1 that can then let me go build a Gen 2? So that is a big part of our conversation, and as well as prepping for investment and scaling that way. So, so short answer is yes. And the longer answer is our goal is to be partners for a long time and help teams in those critical moments.
Yeah, it's great, actually. It's wonderful. So we touched a little bit about the investment. So a little bit deeper into kind of that part of our conversation is, so you said that you invest 250K. So is that at the end of the 6 months? And is this, is this a competitive process? Do all HAX funding? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that so that we can understand, like, what are some expectations from the startup's perspective?
Yes, my apologies, my headphones might die soon, so I'm gonna see if we can avoid IT issues. So yeah, so the way that we make the investment is a $250,000 investment package. So it's broken up in between $150,000 in cash and $100,000 in kind of program fee or associated in-kind services. And our goal for that 100K in kind is to basically we run that at cost. So we lose money on kind of our goal is just like, okay, help pay the bills in terms of getting these engineers to be able to inject into those teams. And so that's all set up front, the program fee. And then the way that we actually make those investments is in tranches. So we're kind of injecting cash at a monthly standpoint, kind of like, okay, here's a first check that's going to get you through this first little bit. We write another check a month later, write another check a month later. So it's all within that first investment package. And then those investments are kind of those monthly milestones are tied to, monthly tranches are tied to milestones. So that's just more of a forcing function to keep moving and keep aiming at these milestones. And I would say the short answer is it's competitive within a startup. So we're not saying, okay, there's 10 startups and only 8 of you will get the final check. Every startup we're set up to invest the full amount that we've set out to invest. The goal is just to make sure that we're hitting the milestones. Teams are doing what they said they're doing. Teams have getting all these things done. So that's currently how it's set up. And by the 6 months, kind of the full $250,000 investment is kind of in either teams' pockets or being spent on actively building things.
Okay, so it's basically during that 6 months you invest slowly through by milestones, that 250K, and then at the end of the 6-month program, you said then you prefer long-lasting relationships and you continue to invest. So is that already per case, per need?
So that's all per case, and we will invest usually up to about $3 million into a team. So over the course of raising kind of Series A, B, C onward, we'll continue to invest. But it's again, all based on where we see opportunity and continue to invest. Right now, about 25% of our capital, kind of in our venture capital allocation, is towards that first set of checks. So $250,000 we're investing in about 35 teams a year. And then 75% of our capital is actually allocated after that first check. So we're investing a majority of our capital into teams as they go and raise their seed, Series A, Series Bs. So I guess the best way to look at it is that first check is our starting the partnership, starting our relationship, and then our goal is to continue supporting teams as they grow.
Okay, yeah, it's clear. Thanks. So I would like to also remind our audience to kind of, drop questions, particular to your startup. If there's individual or personalized things you would like to know, this is a good time. Some of the experiences from Ali, that would be awesome. So the next question that I have is, so you said that there's 35 teams. So is this only one time, the batches, is this like twice a year, once a year that you accept those teams? Or is it like, how does that work, the process of actually accepting teams?
So we have a rolling acceptance. So we're taking in applications every day of the year. We have monthly deadlines. So we're doing kind of batch reviewing of applications at the end of every month, or I guess the beginning of every month. So if you go to our website, there's a deadline on September 30th for putting in the application, and we'll do a deep dive review, and we'll get back to teams usually within about 2 weeks, just because we have so many applications. We'll then do a series of diligence and interview and kind of deep dive with teams. And then as soon as a team is accepted in the program, we make our first investment. They'll usually start at the beginning, the first of the next month. So we usually have around 4 to 5 teams, generally, depending on the month, starting on the first of every month, or 3 to 4 teams.
So from the time they apply, and by the way, so where do they apply? Is their application?
Yeah, so it's all on
Wi-Fi
HAX.
went off.
It's all on HAX.co. So there's an application button, and then there's a portal that you're able to drop in. We often ask for very basic info around your team, how it's set up, what markets you're aiming at, as well as videos from both your team for pitching as well as prototypes. So we'd love to see what you've built and what you're trying to do next. So really, kind of our goal is that it's the first step of just really understanding the basics of your business. And then the time from application to investment is. Yeah. I would say it can range anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 weeks, depending on the complexity of your business. So sometimes some businesses are in the middle of raising other money, and there's other investors involved, and we have to do a lot of discussions. So those sometimes take a little bit longer. But the initial process, we try to be finished within 3 to 4 weeks of really understanding your company, doing first interviews, and kind of having a clear view of like, yes, we want to invest or we don't. That being said, there's also a lot of nimbleness in that process as well, and it sometimes takes 3 days, and sometimes it takes a couple months.
Yeah, sounds good. Is there anything on Garrett, you or Ali? Is there anything that you would like to wish or tell startups during this time? Anything that you would like to kind of, tell them about, either program or anything just about, being an entrepreneur, being a hardware entrepreneur, I would say. Is there anything that you would like to kind of say to them?
I'll let Ali go first if you want.
Sure, yeah. Building a hardware startup is not easy. It's very, very challenging, and much more so than a pure software startup. I've done those in the past. People creating an app can go out, raise money on the back of some traction, and with hardware there are a lot more challenges, and so people coming into hardware startups usually underestimate how long fundraising would take, or how challenging it is to get a first beta product out, and how difficult it is to get pilot customers. And so I think, but at the same, on the flip side, because I've been doing this a long time, this is my third real startup, fourth technical startup. But one thing I will say is that with every startup founder, you need a certain degree of naivety. And so if you actually knew how difficult the process was, most people wouldn't get started. So it's it's interesting to see that first-time founders, they have this sense of naivety, they have this attitude that they can change the world, and often those people do, but it takes a little bit of courage and naivety to be able to really push forward on that. But again, I don't want to discourage anyone by saying that it's incredibly difficult. It's just that you need to know that it's a different landscape to build a hardware startup versus I'd say, SaaS company. So again, I'll let maybe Garrett go into more detail. He can more eloquently explain the differences, but at least in my experience, that's something that I think is valuable for startups to know.
Great. Can you guys hear me okay? My audio is switched. Is it okay? All right.
Yeah. Totally.
So I would say, like Ali's hitting the nail on the head. I think right now, if you Google how to start a startup, a lot of the advice that's given is like even in some of the lean methodology or like what's happening in Silicon Valley, a lot of that advice is given purely from the point of software. So it makes a lot of assumption on how you build a team and how you get customers and how you build and launch your first code. And that entire reference frame just doesn't always work for hardware. There's a lot of awesome things there. There's some great principles to live by, but sometimes that advice just isn't suited for building a complex robot or building a medical device. And I think the key is to, as soon as you get in like, okay, I want to build this awesome IoT network or robot or whatever it might be, like finding the network of people that can give you the advice necessary to build that type of company, taking what you can from the Silicon Valley Bible or whatever you want to call it, the principles that live by, but then also kind of balancing that with, oh yeah, my cash flow is going to be entirely different because I'm a hardware startup, or I have to think about R&D cycles in terms of maybe months or years rather than days, and really kind of making those different types of choices on how you build your team, how you take an investment, how you interact with different customers, and finding folks and networks that understand that and support that, rather than just purely relying on the traditional startup model that exists out on the internet these days.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I think we have a question from an audience. Let me see, hold on. I'm trying to get to it. Hold on just a second.
Let's see, I see it on screen.
Yeah.
How are mentors involved in the program? Are mentors involved? Yep.
Yeah. So how are the mentors? So the question is from Armine. How are the mentors involved in the program? And are mentors involved on pro bono basis, or they get equity compensation?
So I think the way that we think about this is in a couple layers. So we have like a set of mentors that are just part of the program. So our goal is to get smart people and not like have to figure out shares and who's paying who. Like we have a few key mentors, both from global SOSV as well as within HAX, that are just in my opinion, just fantastic people. And like we just inject them into teams, they get some feedback, and kind of have those on monthly or bi-monthly cycles. We also do have a network of more extended mentors, and our goal is to not say, okay, it's mentor time, go pick a mentor you give shares of your company to, equity. Like our goal is to actually have people interact with each other first, see if it's the right fit, and then encourage them to, if it's the right fit in terms of engagement, structurally make that a relationship, right? Give either advisor shares or some other mechanism for engaging. But our goal is to force relationships, especially when equity is involved. So our goal is to give access, but not necessarily force interaction.
Yeah. And then what about the investment, the 250K? Is that also like, what is the share? Is it, again, is it
Yep.
per case, or is it a kind of, per,
Yep.
what's
So,
the requirement?
Yeah, so the base deal that we're like the standard deal that we have is $250,000 investment package at it's technically not a valuation, but the best way to think about it is for 10 to 14% of your company. So our goal is to become a significant shareholder, So that usually puts valuations around $2 million, $1.75 to $2 million for valuations. And then we become a shareholder in your company via taking equity, and it's structured in different ways. But I would say it's our goal is to build those first and foremost with founders in mind, and maintaining kind of the position equity of founders, as well as positioning for follow-on fundraising and making sure the structure of that deal incentivizes other investors to also come in and support growth.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, Ahmed says thank you. Well, it seems like if there's any more questions from the audience, otherwise it seems like I've gone through most of the questions. Is there anything else on your side? Happy to hear it. If there's, let's give maybe another few seconds to see if there's any more questions from the audience. And good luck, Ali, with Robomart. This is a perfect idea. It couldn't be better for you, for your type of product also. So it's definitely also, I
appreciate that. Thank you.
It's also definitely about, being at the right place and meeting the right people. And that's definitely the case here. And Garrett, good luck with, kind of difficult time for, hardware startups. And, oh, we have one from Astrid. Also good luck with that. So we have a question from Astrid. What can the program offer to the startups that have already passed the prototyping phase, or are you mainly focused on the early stage startups?
Yeah, so we'll work with teams that already have pre-production, and even some teams that are in production. And oftentimes the engagement can be various ways. One is us just being aware of how to deal with global supply chains and restructuring things, whether it's to China or different places. So we do work with in production startups. Oftentimes what we see is startups do need to quit a bit of work to optimize and refine. So we will dig in on that. And so we will do that. We'll also work with teams that maybe already have launched an initial product that's doing well enough but needs to be optimized, or they're looking at their generation 2. And then we'll work on kind of taking that existing technology and say, okay, how do we refine this to either reach a different level of scale, integrate a new set of technology, kind of bring in a different level of expertise. So we will, that being said, there are probably things that if a team is making a significant amount of revenue already, or has already taken, already raised their Series A or raised a really big seed round, it's probably not the best time for us to come in, just based on how we usually like to invest and interact at that level. But we have invested in quite a few teams that are already doing some sort of production.
Awesome. Thanks. Maybe give another few seconds if there's any more questions. Yeah, it seems like we've been pretty thorough through every process of the stay of the program, and it seems like they have no more questions. Okay, well, thank you so much, you guys, for your time and during these kind of crazy uncertain times, and dedicating your time doing this for us. It was really helpful, and hopefully, we'll have some flow from this part of the world into HAX program. And Ali, thank you again for your time, and good luck with Robomart.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Liana. Garrett, great speaking.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.